right, welcome back. My name is Aurelia Wynn. I'm the CEO at Wynn Publications. And today I have the pleasure of speaking with author Dr. Betty Burrus Wright. If you don't mind introducing yourself, and let's go ahead and get right into the book.
My name is Dr. Betty Burrus Wright. I consider myself agent of social change. I'm a human rights, human relation activist, and I am working with children trying to find ways to minimize the trauma that they experienced. So I've just written the stories of 5 children who were victims of incest and subsequently went into prostitution.
How did you get into this line of work?
This line of work, in terms of writing, I want to say I fell into it, but then I think that my entire life is really by divine trajectory. I had no idea I was going to be writing for the marketplace. But my line of work has always been to be the champion for children's rights. So when I started as a marriage and family therapist, the parents would bring their children with their problems. And so I just, as a marriage and family therapist, start working with children. And as I work with families, these children started to tell the adult women that were children at the time began to tell their story of incest. And so that's how I got into this particular line of work.
Mm-hmm. And so why should I, a reader, read your book? What is this going to do for me, or what can I expect to get out of it?
Searchers, Brave 1,000 Deaths is the subtopic. As you read the book, there are 5 stories that will touch the lives of humanity, not just a particular race or gender, but these stories are experienced throughout the universe. And so as you read these, I want you to come away, number one, with the idea that judging these children or women or men that we see on the block selling themselves for whatever they can get as recompense, I want you to come away and say, I don't know the whole story, therefore I may be judging them incorrectly. So not to judge them. The second thing to come away with as you read this book is to ask yourself, what is my internal occupation? And by that, I mean, what is my judgment and beliefs about the monikers that people call them whores, prostitutes, bad girls? What is my own internal occupation about that? I need to look at that and say, maybe I need to change that to asking the question, what happened to these children? What happened to these women? How can I help? Mm-hmm. And I grant you, and I promise you, if you sit with the question long enough, the answer will arrive. Mm-hmm. What can I do? I think one of the problems we have is that we see this as a problem. And when we look at things as a problem, automatically we start to believe that there is a right and wrong answer. I'd like for us to look at this as a challenge. And with a challenge, we embrace it with creativity, with moments of success.
Mm-hmm.
And so as you read the book, you're going to do an internal occupation, change your judgment. Don't judge the children. You're going to look at them and say, what can I do to help mitigate this challenge? And then develop a community-based network where you can start to look at the red flags. I call it awareness. When we look at these children, if you see inappropriate behavior, like they're depressed, like they're fighting, like they're skipping school, like they are looking at their cell phone and laughing, then you need to really start to kind of ask the question in your mind, I wonder if something is going on with that child. And just keep looking and looking for patterns. If you see this going on frequently and regularly, then your role, our role, I can't do this by myself, even though I'm the author, I'm the therapist. It's a community effort. Then you need to call Child Protective Services or 211 and let them do the investigation. That's their job. They're skilled at that, but they won't know where to look unless we make the clarion call. So that's what I'm hoping, and I know will come as a result of turning the pages. When we look at Peppercat, when we look at Tomas, when we look at Carmen, or even Carbella, when we look at these stories, there is a message not only for parents, but for children, for the universities to do treatment planning. There is a message for all of us to look at how can we save our children.
Yeah. And on that note, how can we save our children?
There is, in terms of incest, let me talk about incest that in my 5 studies, and it doesn't happen to everyone, and I want to be real clear about that. Incest is the least reported sex abuse there is, because more often than not, incest is perpetrated on children, and the brain is undeveloped. And so when the perpetrator put in threats and put it in with the confusion of love-hate, the child is confused, the mother is confused. So there is no reporting. But what we know is that there is no specific race, creed, color, demographic, any part of the United States. It has no boundaries. Let me give you an example. I was talking to someone last week, and just opening this book up has given people permission to talk about their experiences. And that's one of the great things that will come out of this book. It will give people permission to say, this happened to me. So this young woman said, she lives in Hawaii. She says, my father had sex with all 5 of us, all 5 of the daughters. All 5 of the daughters. Then I talked to a group in Alaska, one of the little islands, one of the little communities. It is a unspoken behavior. It just happens. And so when we look at Carmen in the book, Searchers, Carmen is fairly wealthy, has everything going on, and yet her father was the perpetrator. So no, and with Tomas in the book, Tomas is a boy. His grandfather is a pastor of a church. Mm-hmm. So no, it has no geographical boundaries. It has no economic status. It can happen to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
But there are signs of inappropriate behavior that should bring about the question, what is going on with this child that's dressing inappropriately, that is depressed, that is not going to school, that passes by, that's hanging out? These are the kind of behaviors that we need to keep chronicling and looking at and saying, maybe something is wrong. And all the time we don't know that. But what we do know, I'd rather err on the side of safety than have the child's life hurt and deranged for the rest of her life.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, just listening to you talk, I want to say sometimes people might experience that, might witness a child who seems to be struggling, and they might think that, oh, this isn't any of my business. What do you have to say to someone who feels like, well, it's not really my business, I don't really know the child, I don't want to poke my nose in something? What might you say to someone that's thinking like that?
I would like to say that that's probably a common thought. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us like to silo our lives, and in my work, we call it coping skills. Wow. Because if you don't know, then you don't have to take action. Mm-hmm. But there's also the part of us that know and we don't want to get involved. We're all created and we're all humans. We're all on this planet together. So we have to take action. And I'll give you an example of how it affects even yet unborn children. One of my clients told me her daughter is 4 years old. She and her dad were playing a game of masturbating together. So when the child got to school and the daycare, she was trying to play with another 4-year-old. They don't know the inappropriate plus appropriate behavior. So you cannot say it's none of my business. It is your business. It may be your grandchild that is at the same school, or it may be a neighbor. Yeah. We're all part of a community, and it is our business to open our eyes and take responsibility for saving the next generation.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And so you have alluded to it somewhat in the beginning of our conversation, but so these are survivor stories essentially that is found in Searchers, or can you clarify that for us?
Right. These are, and one of the things about Dr. Betty is the body of work that I do has to do with opening and illuminating the things that our four-parent society has put a taboo on. So when you look at Dr. Betty's body of work, it's going to be illuminating and opening up these taboo subjects like incest, like rape, like trafficking, like all of that. So what I do in my writing, it has given people permission to say, I'm not in this alone. And the women in this story says, if I tell my story, it will help me heal.
Yeah.
And that's what I want people to do, even though my work preferably is in prevention. However, my clinical work is in intervention. So these women who are now adults are having all kind of psychosomatic illnesses, like there's no clinical evidence for what's happening. For example, one of them is experiencing a paralysis. There's no clinical evidence for this, but it all stems back to the incest. And so I'm saying, tell your story, find a therapist and tell your story. It will help you find moments of wellness. And I want to be real clear. There is no whole healing, 100% healing for any sex abuse, but we can find moments of wellness where we can manage it in time frames. So these women are now adult and they are recounting what happened to them from 5 years old till they got prostituted at 11. So that's how these women came to be. So if this has happened to any of you, find you a therapist. Find your women's group. There is a incest anonymous group that you can join, that you can pull up on your internet. So there's a lot of ways you can find moments of wellness.
Yeah, yeah. And I was just getting ready to say, how does someone find the courage to even begin sharing their stories? I know, there's few people in my life that I would suspect something has happened to just by the way that they behave. But what would cause someone to even get to the point of sharing that story with a therapist or a friend or in a women's group? How does someone say, okay, I'm going to tell my story?
I'd like to tell the story. My husband and I were shopping at a Safeway store, and this woman was looking like she was homeless and she was begging. And I took a moment and I said to her, you can do better than this. Why don't you go back to school? Well, of course, my husband was outraged that I would stop and entertain that kind of conversation just for a second. It was a couple of years later that I saw this same woman dressed and at the bank taking care of business. So it is our responsibility to drop the seed, to plant the seed, and maybe, just maybe, that's where they can hear. I'll give you another example, and this is a very personal story. I was very comfortable in my marriage and in my teaching position, and I was just kind of laid back, thinking I had a good life. And my husband said to me, he said, Betty, you need to get you a life, get you a good life, get you a better life. Well, I was hurt, but it was that 4 words, get you a life, that gave me the courage. After I got through crying, it gave me the courage to say, there's something more for me. And after that, he was the wind beneath my wings and supported me as I soared north. And I tell you, after that, I have had 2 different careers, but he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. But it is our responsibility to just say, even to the women that are observing their daughters being incest, if we say to these women, go back to school or get into a group. Not a sermon, just 4 words. You can do better.
Yeah.
Get into a group. That's how we help make it better and help minimize the incest so the women and the children can move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know last time we had met and we were talking about this particular topic, and my mind kind of wondered about the people who commit these acts against children, and trying to understand it. Can you talk a little bit about that? You had given a great example last time, and I just wanted to bring it back up again. Like, how do you even make sense of what a perpetrator is thinking, or can we talk a little bit about that from that angle?
I'm glad you asked that question because I have some real thoughts about it, and I'm going to kind of wander into the answer to that. I think that our system, our neurological system, and I think that our technology, and I think that our medical systems, we all need to come together and find a way to, first of all, find out what caused the problems. What we're doing now as intervention, putting the perpetrator in jail, castrating, that's not working. We need to find the cause. Is it biological? Is it a learned behavior? I have worked with perpetrators. And one of the things that comes out of these interviews with these men is they become suicidal afterwards. They do not want to engage in this kind of behavior. It's almost like they are driven by whatever that is, we don't know yet, learned behavior or biological behavior, a chemical imbalance. But they are, Dr. Betty, I do not want to do this. Dr. Betty, I am so sorry I did that. I'm going to kill myself. I don't want to do it again. So it's not like, now, of course, this is not everybody. I'm talking specifically about the ones that I've worked with. One of the women who had been sexually abused, she brought her infant daughter, who was still in diapers, into the office. And I said to her, change the diaper. Well, I picked the child up and cuddled it. And I gave the child back to the mother to change the diaper. The child screamed like there was excruciating pain. Well, right then, it came to me that the mother had been fingering and molesting the infant because that's what she had learned. So when we put a Band-Aid on what is happening in incest, that's not a long-term help. We've got to find out the cause and then treat the cause.
Closing, is there anything else that you would like to share with those watching this about the book, about anything that you have coming up? What can we look forward to?
On the 16th of March, there's going to be a book discussion about Searchers Brave 1,000 Deaths, and it's put on by the Richmond, California Foundation of Libraries. So if you go online and just pull up Dr. Betty Burrus Wright or the Richmond, California Foundation of Library, you can join that discussion. You can ask questions. What do I want people to come away with? I want them to come away with a sense of community. Come out of the silo of that's them and not me. It is you. It is us. It is all of us. And I'm not asking that you go into anyone's bedroom and be the peeping Tom. I'm asking that you be observant to any child, if you see inappropriate behavior and you err on the side of caution, that's better than not taking action at all. I'd like to give an example. I was on my way to my office on McDonald, and every morning there was this Cadillac parked near the bus stop. And I kept thinking something is amiss. What is he sitting here at the bus stop where these children are getting on the bus or getting off the bus? So after several observations, I called the Richmond, California Police Department. And I said, this is Dr. Betty, and I'm observing this man sitting in the Cadillac, and I think he may be waiting for one of the children. And he said to me, Dr. Betty, we cannot arrest a man for sitting in his car by the bus stop. There has to be some interaction. And when I hung up, I said, thank you for not profiling. So we have to be careful not to profile. But if we have constant observation and we see patterns, then we can err on the side of caution as opposed to not making any kind of effort to save the child. I think one of the things I was asked before was, if I write another book, who would I like to author a book with?
Sure.
And his name is I just say T, Mr. T. Coates, Coats. He's the one that wrote Water Dancer. Why would I like to author a book with him? He took a very hard, wrenching subject of slavery and couched it in words that were palatable. So the reader didn't turn away. They got the story in a way that they can digest it. And that's what's happening with searchers. Don't turn away from the stories. They may be heart-wrenching. I cried every time I interviewed one of these children. I cried when I wrote the story, but it's life. It happened. And so don't turn away. It's a message in there for you. I have one last thing. This book is available through Amazon, through Win, and through Dr. Betty's publication. However, Win's publication is the easiest to get to and the most quickly turn around. So if you're going to buy the book, go to Win's publication, even though they have it on Amazon. I found it easier, and they have the ebook. And so that's my recommendation.
Reading the book, is there something that we can do as a reader to kind of help our own mental health while we're reading the book? Or do you think that's necessary, or what are your thoughts on that?
I think when you're reading the book, I think it's wonderful. It's best if you can read it in pairs or in a group. Some of the people I'm working with are doing it in book clubs. That way you have, when you get to Pepper Cat's invasion of her body, when you get to that point where you may find yourself in tears, you can talk with your partner, you can talk with your book club. I suggest reading it in pairs.
Yeah.
I had a gentleman call me from Texas, and he says, Dr. Betty, it's 8 o'clock here. I said, try and wait till in the morning to read it. It's very difficult to sleep on this kind of information. That's part of my trigger warning.
Yeah, and that's good. That's good. And I like that you said read it in pairs, because in the back of the book there is a section for discussion questions and things like that. And so even if you're someone who gets the book and you're not reading it in pairs, you can answer those questions in your journal. I think that this is a great book to help you explore some things with your own healing and your own pursuit of having moments of wellness. Is have a journal while you read it as well. To me, that was something that was really
Right. That's a good one.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Okay,
Okay.
wonderful.